Welcome to My Face, My Story, Voices from the Craniofacial Community, with your host, Dina Zuckerberg.
Hello, and welcome to My Face, My Story, Voices from the Craniofacial Community. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, click subscribe now so that you'll never miss a future episode. And if you're a fan of My Face, My Story, rate and review the program on Apple Podcasts so that we can get our message of inclusivity and empowerment to more people. I'm your host, Dina Zuckerberg, the Director of Family Programs at MyFace. I was born with a cleft lip, a hearing loss, and no vision in my left eye. My Face, My Story is about people like us being seen and heard, about sharing stories within the craniofacial community and with others. Today, I will be joined by Kathleen Watt. Kathleen Watt sang principal roles with various opera companies and in the extra chorus of New York's Metropolitan Opera before her singing career was summarily ended by osteogenic sarcoma, bone cancer in her face. She recently wrote her memoir, Rearranged, which tells of leaving the operatic stage for a starring role opposite the Big C. Bone cancer in her cheek ended her career and brought her face to face with mortality, disfigurement, the meaning and uses of beauty, and a lot of leftover pieces. Rearranged is a story about letting go to hold on, of putting old pieces to new uses, and of the unlikely arrangements that make it all work out. Since retiring from performing, she has written frequently on performing arts and cultural issues, including features, profiles, and essays. As a writer and cancer survivor, Kathleen has collaborated with doctors and artists on a range of projects, including an appearance on a BBC 4 series about facial disfigurement. Formerly an assistant art director in publishing, Kathleen attended Rhode Island School of Design, Brown University, and Brigham Young University, earning a double BFA in art and music, with postgraduate studies in opera performance at Boston University. Kathleen now writes from a windswept hay farm in the Catskill Mountains of New York, where she resides with her partner, 10 chickens, 3 dogs, and on occasion, her 2 grown stepchildren. Welcome, Kathleen. I really look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Dina. It's a delight to be here.
Yes. So, why and how did you become an opera singer?
Well, my mother was a classically trained singer, so I grew up with the sound of that kind of a voice in my ear early on. But I took the long way around. I went to several different schools, as you just recounted. I got a BFA in art and a minor in voice, but I chose to prioritize singing because it has, supposedly it has an expiration date. And also with serious singing, I had to come to the grudging understanding that the only way to get paid was to get hired by a company, so that meant opera. But once I got into it, I was really hooked on grand opera. I liked, one of the things I liked about it, besides the camaraderie of other musicians and the music and the lights and the costumes and everything, was the way that operatic singing is almost like an athletic activity.
Right.
It's full-bodied, muscular, and musical and lyrical all at the same time. So I really enjoyed all of that. So I had to get a job.
Right. I fell in love. The first opera I ever saw was Madame Butterfly, and I fell in love with the opera after that. Yeah.
That's one that will make you fall in love.
Yes. So take us back to the day when you learned that you had bone cancer in the face. What was going through your mind?
Well, my tumor was identified by my dentist, as often happens with head and neck cancers or serious head and neck conditions. I asked my partner, Evie, to help me identify a bump in the gum line over my back teeth, and we agreed that I should ask my dentist about it. But he sent me to an endodontist who thought it might be a condition requiring a root canal.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sent me to an oral surgeon who thought it might deserve a biopsy. So by March, I had my diagnosis. And I first heard the news on my answering machine. It's not something you're ever
Right.
really prepared for, even if you've seen it in others, and it might be coming. We took one step at a time as
Right.
it was revealed to us. What else can you do?
Right.
And I had surgery in April, which coincidentally, I had my surgery in April on the very same day that I was scheduled to audition with the Met for my
Mm.
full-time position. So it was very, very karmic in that way.
So as you say, you were an opera singer and then you auditioned for roles. How did preparing for your surgery, especially your first surgery, parallel that experience of auditioning for the opera? How did that experience help you in your medical journey, if it did
Well,
indeed help you? Yeah.
yeah, that's a great question, and it came upon me. The answer to your question came upon me as I was writing. As an opera singer, of course, my diagnosis was cataclysmic. It put my career plans in jeopardy, and my instrument that is my body was at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my whole reason for being at the moment. I was in mid-career. The diagnosis came right in the middle of the operatic season. So
Right.
I was more or less in performer mode as we took on the cancer, and I remained so actually for a couple of years. And my very first questions when I heard about the diagnosis, or when I first got my tests and I knew what was in the future for me, was could I make it back to the season? Could I make it
Right.
back and have enough time to practice and be ready for the season? I would miss the second half of the current season, but could I get back for the next season?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in performer mode, and in retrospect, as I was writing, I realized that I kind of I prepped for my role as a patient in much the same way that I might prepare to sing a character role. In
Right.
fact, right from the outset, because I learned of my hiring at the Met by way of an answering machine message, in
Mm-hmm.
which the maestro told me that I had missed my first rehearsal, which nobody told me about, and I would be fired if I missed the next one.
Right.
Similarly, I learned about my cancer on an a telephone answering machine message. It's so ancient I can't even remember how to say it. But this time from my oral specialist, and he was saying it never was a dental problem. That was a waste of time. It's cancer, and I might die if I don't find a head and neck surgeon.
Wow.
So they were two very, distinctly different embarkations on a big adventure. So,
Right. Right.
and then I basically took on the responsibility of the role I had to play as a patient, and learned everything I could about it,
Right.
and attended coachings, consultations, and then I showed up for the downbeat. And then once the curtain is up, just as in a performance, there's no way to go but forward.
Right. Right.
Go on.
And that's what you had to do, right? You had to go forward through the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and in retrospect, I really think a lot of my training as a singer gave me resources that I would come to rely upon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not unique to singing, but anybody who becomes a I think anybody who becomes a hostage of the hospital situation, in whatever their situation is, uh, brings to it all of their resources. I mean,
Right.
I had physical fitness and patience. I think as a longtime student of classical voice, but
Right.
whatever it is, you have a lot of the resources within you to meet
Mm,
and sustain the ordeal that seems like something completely novel until
right.
you recognize that you bring your whole self to it,
Right.
and very often you're uh, more equal to it than you expect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. So what or who gave you strength to get through, I believe it's 32 surgeries to
Yeah,
get to where you are
32,
today?
32 with general anesthesia, not counting the little ones.
Okay.
Well, I have to credit my support system. Of course, there's nothing more powerful or sustaining than a strong support system. I had my siblings, and my
Mm,
primary caregiver was my partner Evie, who was absolutely essential. And she was never able to breathe easy until the whole thing was over, and we never
right.
knew how long it was going to be. So we were kind of in an isometric holding pattern for a decade. But she and the maid and the role she played, the role of the caregiver, are actually major characters in the book. But they all showed up, my siblings and my partner, and because they kept showing up, I felt I ought to make it worth their while, I guess.
Right.
It gave me an incentive to keep showing up. If this was worth it to them, I better make it worth it for them to come. And I will add to a certain extent that we entertained each other. I mean,
Right.
nothing is more important than a committed support system.
Yeah.
But I will also add that we should never underestimate the value of humor, and
Absolutely.
there's science behind that now too.
Right.
That, as I understand it, nothing releases the brain's healing hormones, the endorphins, the dopamine that everybody's always trying to get from somewhere. There's nothing that releases it like a good joke, a
Yeah.
cracking good laugh, and that's something you can do for yourself. Have you
Yeah.
found that?
I love humor, and that is something, yes. And I also think that's what I love when I was reading your memoir about how you talk about those moments that are like seem so crazy or hard, and then you're talking about the humor that you brought into that. And I love that. I also, when you're talking about caregivers or having that support, I always say, like, I remember my mother being there for every surgery I had, and how, and I talk to parents today and they talk about how they worry so much. And I say, you know what? Your child's going to remember that you advocated hard for them. And I
Hmm.
still remember that. And I think I'm sure that's what they had to advocate, I'm sure, all the time for you as well, especially because
Well,
you couldn't communicate so much.
yeah. Well, that's a perfect uh, example when of your mother showing up, of how your life is not on hold
Right.
while you're there. You're having your life.
Right.
So during that time, as difficult as it may have been, and you would not choose it or wish it on anyone, but in that time, you're building this relationship with your mom,
Yeah.
and and yourself in all kinds of ways. It's I do think that it's self-defeating to think of serious illness as a something that you have to just uh, uh, get through, or you have to put everything on hold and then pick
Right.
it up again after it's over. I don't. I think you miss your opportunity there.
Right. I agree. So for me, I was born with my facial differences. It's what I've always known. I imagine that experience would be so different for you, having your face reconstructed and seeing how it changed your appearance. Can you talk about that?
Well, Dina, I'm pretty much okay about it now, but
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching you and others, in your field for quite a while, and I have to admit, I don't wear it as smoothly as you do.
Mm,
I just, I used to avoid mirrors and,
right,
you know, picture windows and overturned spoons. I
right,
just, so at least that part has improved. But I admit, I shied away from Zooms or FaceTime or Skype or anything, even during the pandemic. And if it weren't for this book forcing me to get out there,
right.
I've had to make my peace with it. And even now, you can see I use my strategies,
Right.
trying to look casual as I hold up the bad side of my face.
Listen, I don't think anybody loves to see themselves on camera. Even the most beautiful people, I'm not sure love it either
Exactly.
and can find the flaws. So, yeah. So, and
Yeah,
I still
exactly.
don't
I'm
like
worried about,
watching myself. So,
yeah,
I get it.
yeah. Truth to tell, I was worried about it before I had my,
Right.
acquired deformity. It is I think it's quite different. Um, as you say, um, in the fact that I think maybe it's not something I've been able to develop into as you
Right.
have. I mean, I'm a lot older than you are, so probably I've had as long to develop into my
Right.
deformity as you had from birth. But, and it's silly because it's, as you say, it's not silly, but it's an obstacle that I place in my own way.
Right.
I can only speak for myself. Um, that I need not, because um, the real cost, and never mind what it indicates about me, is inside. You have much more self-assurance than I do, and I still have to work on it.
Right.
I'm not as free as you are.
Right. Well,
I
it's taken me
always
a
want to.
lot of years to get to this point. This did not, I promise you, did not happen overnight. And if you told me 15 years ago that I would be hosting a podcast or going into schools, I would have said you were absolutely crazy. That would never happen. And so I guess you never know what life has in store for you. And it definitely, I mean, I'm sure doing this is making you grow in ways that you never thought that you could, probably
Yeah,
5 years ago or 10 years ago. So,
never would
yeah,
have imagined it. Never could have planned it.
right.
So keep working at it, and I can't say that I regret
Mm-hmm.
any of it.
Right. Right. To our audience, I hope that you're enjoying this episode of My Face, My Story. Whether it's your first time joining us or you've been with us since the beginning, make sure you've subscribed to our YouTube channel and Apple Podcast channels and sign up for our mailing list at myface.org/mystory. So let's talk about your book. Why did you decide to write your memoir, Rearranged?
Well, why did I write it? I wanted to write. That's
Right.
why I did. And to be honest, Dina, I really never, I really, I took field notes along
Mm-hmm.
the way, and I had a lot of them because my support team saved all my notes, including from my
Mm-hmm.
scratch pad when I was in ICU psychosis and couldn't talk. But so I had my notes, but I never really wanted to write a cancer story, even a survivor story. I just didn't want to do that. But I wanted to do more writing.
Right.
And, cancer was the biggest, most dramatic thing that had ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I decided to stitch together all those notes that I took,
Right.
and I found that it's not. People ask me, what was it like giving up singing? It has not been an empty crater. It's been
Right.
stilled by, I have thought of it even as the persistent joy of singing, albeit with a different voice.
Right.
So that's one reason um, why I wrote the book, is to use my new voice. So and I think the byproduct of a very selfish, that's kind of, I think of it as sort of a, you know, well, an artist always wants to perform, and maybe I have an artist spirit, I don't know, but it seems a little self-seeking to me to just, use it because I want to write about something, so I write about myself. But it's been gratifying to me, having done it, to see that just having stuck it out can be an inspiration or an encouragement, and in some ways living proof, to anyone facing this or any other battle of a lifetime, whatever form it may take, yours or mine, or an internal kind of disorder or challenge of any kind.
Right.
Can be surmounted, putting one foot in front of the other,
Right.
and believing in the best, I think.
So was it
That's why I wrote the
cathartic for you?
book.
So was it cathartic for you to write the book?
It was more than I expected. More than I expected, because from a writing perspective, it was a joy. I felt. And when I was unable to return to singing, a friend who became a dear friend gave me an opportunity to begin writing for the performing arts. So I had that niche, and I had a start at it. And I'd had some practice with it, and this was a big, rich project, but it had been more than 20 years.
Right.
And I'd written all these notes, and I was extremely familiar with the story. I thought I thought I'd moved on. Well, I'd moved on to a completely different life.
Right.
And honestly, I was very surprised to see the flood of feelings that I still had locked away somewhere. I guess I must have, triaged them until until I could get to them, I guess. And and then with each chapter, there were the feelings again. And I had a good writing situation at that time, so some days I just let it all fly,
Right.
And sometimes I just did that for the rest of the day.
Right. So
But and this is another link to singing. With young singers especially, trying so hard and so devoted to getting a character and the music and embodying it and doing justice to it. A young singer will often, especially in coachings or in a voice lesson, begin to weep, because they're so moved. And as a young singer, the same thing happened to me, especially with characters that I absolutely loved and couldn't wait to get working on. I would go in and I would weep, and I would kind of, in the back of my mind, I'm sure I was kind of hoping to be approved for that, for being so deeply moved. And all I heard was, get over your emotion, just get it all out, and then get over it, because you are not able to deliver to anyone else the opportunity to be moved by the material in the way that you were.
Right.
People want to come and be moved by your performance. They don't want to see you be moved, all over the stage.
Right.
So in some ways, it was, I'm not going to say that it doesn't bother me anymore. I mean, there's certainly fraught, but it's when I go over the details of things, but it has been a great relief to have it in one piece, like a an orb of some kind that's full of the story, and I can put it over here and look at it and observe it, but it doesn't affect me,
Right.
to emotional breakdown as it did before. And I feel that I've completely lived that and completely left it there to live the rest of my life.
Right.
So, yes, I guess that's the definition of cathartic. Mhm.
Okay. So we know the techniques are so different today. What advice would you give someone today in making the choices about their care?
Oh, about if they had what I had?
Yes.
Um,
Or, going through all these reconstructive surgeries, and is there?
yeah. The advice I would give is to inform yourself as much as possible.
Right.
Try to understand what's in store for you. Prepare yourself with specific questions about procedures. These are things that you can do, and include questions about whatever you may have heard somewhere or seen on
Right.
Google. Doctors appreciate this. They want to know where you're coming from. The best doctors want to hear
Right.
what you need to know as a patient to take responsibility and in the best way that you can to be a partner in this project and make their elite, sophisticated brainiac skills reach the greatest outcome. So they need to know, even if they don't admit it. But many of the younger generation of doctors coming along are very much more open to that. As you prepare yourself, don't forget to include the things that scare you. Let them know what scares you.
Right.
And what things you're going to need help with.
Right.
And then after you've prepared as much as you can with questions about what's going to happen to you, and with the things that you're able to articulate about yourself that you can offer to them to add to their toolbox, then you have to kind of audition a couple of teams.
Right.
And with these questions and how they add, you're not ever going to be able to judge the quality of their intellect, or the comparative professional preparedness. You're not going to know those things because it's a completely different thing and it's not your specialty. But as a patient, you can see how you'll know how you feel about the way they answer your questions. If the only thing you can do is evaluate their character and kindness, is it important to them to listen to you?
Right.
Because it's going to be a long road. The consultation, the consult is just a couple of hours on the front end.
Right.
But you're going to, it's important to know that you're joining a team that needs your input, whether they know it or not.
Right.
And you need to be a willing patient, which you will be if you trust them.
Right.
And so you can tell from the way that they answer your questions whether you're important in their mind to the whole enterprise of your care.
Right.
So communication is crucial, and trust are the most important things, I think, that fall to a patient at the beginning of their treatment.
I'm always careful to people say, "Oh, who do you recommend or who you like?" I think it's such a personal decision who you decide to go with, what medical team you decide to go to, because one person may have a great experience and another not so great experience. And I agree, it's who you trust in the end, who feels right for you to get through that process. Because if it doesn't, I don't think it's going to work well. So I think trust is so key to it. And I think also, I think so many in the craniofacial community, and I'm sure you would probably agree, is that having coordinated care, having a team that works together is probably very valuable as well.
Oh, coordinated care is crucial.
Yeah.
Because at the top of the team, if you take 2 or 3 consults, I think that's enough to demonstrate that at the top, the elite physicians are pretty equal to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They're all doing miraculous things, but the caliber of the care in the steps after the surgery, or the top entrance levels of the serious illness, after the elite surgeon has finished, these can make or break their work.
Right.
And there's so much else going on with the patient,
right,
other than just that
yes,
first level.
Yeah, and it's not just the surgery; it's also, in some ways, the psychosocial what's going on. The mental health too, I think, is probably key to the whole
Absolutely.
process.
Psychosocial. And then you've got speech pathologists and movement coaches, and you have an interaction with them, and they have an interaction with your primary surgeon, and all of that has to be smooth,
right?
In order for the miracle to be sustained. And in my situation, I had a very the surgery that they did on me is regularly done now, but it was kind of out on the frontier at that time.
Right.
But it was doable, and it had good numbers behind it, and in the first instance, it was successful on me.
Right.
And I would choose it again. It had a 97% success rate, and that was a good number for me. And the outcome, when it was successful, was one that I wanted.
Right.
But I had a cataclysmic complication.
Yes, I read that.
And if I had not had a smoothly running team after that, even though a miracle had saved me once, there are many times when my goose could have been cooked. Right. And over the period of time that I had to recover from, once all the miracle was accomplished, then I had to recover and grow into that, different person, different body, different looks. I mean, my outcome was good.
Right.
But at any point, if they had not had equally brilliant and sensitive adjuncts at the other levels, the stepwise levels into wellness, I won't say they're below them. They have different skills.
Right.
And the patient is equally dependent upon those. So coordinated teams are absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And they were kind of new at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The hospital that I went to had it had been built like maybe 5 years prior, and it had a revolutionary addition called the family waiting room.
Right.
I mean, that to have such a thing be such a common, obvious, logical thing be considered a revolutionary contribution is unbelievable. Yeah. but yes, and teams are getting smoother all the time.
Absolutely. So, knowing what you know now, what is one thing you would tell your younger self? What is that one thing you would say?
Well, nobody nobody could ever tell my younger self anything, to tell you the truth.
There you go.
So I wouldn't want to have to.
Okay. So, who do you
Um,
see when you look in the mirror today?
I see a striver.
Mhm.
I see, you know, I see my whiskers, you know.
Right.
I miss the face that I used to have, you know, but it's not, you know, your priorities change. And a
Hmm.
lot of in some respect, the rearrangement of my priorities is something that happens with um, you know, age or maturation
Hmm.
anyway. It just is not worth the trouble that it would take to, you know, to make up. But in the absence of you know, wearing makeup or striving for a certain level of you know, uh, socially definable attractiveness, it just all seems so silly to
Yeah.
me.
We could have a
And
whole nother conversation about beauty, and I mean that's a whole nother conversation. But
it is, and we should
yeah,
have it sometime, Dina.
exactly. We should. So, where can people go to find out more and buy your book? Do you have a website?
Oh, yes, I do. And it's my name, www.kathleenwatts.com. And it has some of my other writing there too, but it's most, you know, it's kind of flooded now with information about the book. Um, Also, the book has its own story. There's a lot of, you know, people pull different things from it besides just the arc of the medical story.
Right.
But at the end, I want to mention that I intentionally added an afterword to describe how what happened to me is not going to happen to anyone else who has craniofacial uh, osteogenic sarcoma in 2024. Not because the oncology part of it, unfortunately, is not very much advanced, but the way they do it
Mm.
and the technology and the techniques that are, you know, in current medicine that are brought to bear with the reconstruction phase, which is the thing that altered my life.
Right.
Um, well, it's the thing that used up a decade.
Mm.
Not the cancer, but the, you know, and uh, that aspect has changed dramatically. And so I would direct people to who are facing this particular challenge um, to heed that part as well,
Okay.
because you know, so as not to be completely daunted by the medical part of the book.
Okay.
But um, but that's where it is, and it's also available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com
Okay.
and Bookshop.org, and you can ask your local bookstore to order it.
Okay. Well, I read it on my Kindle, so
Oh,
yes,
you did
I
good,
did.
good.
Yes, thank you. So, Kathleen, thank you for sharing your journey with us and your story. You
Well,
have gone through all the surgeries and medical journey with self. You could have gone through all those surgeries and medical journey with self pity. Instead, you did it with incredible strength, support, and what I love is your humor. So, thank you.
well, it's my great pleasure. And getting to know you, Dina, a little bit as I
Yes,
have.
yes,
Dina showed up at my launch party, so that was great.
yes, definitely.
And I'm in awe of what you do.
Thank
So
you.
onward and upward. Let's support each other.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.
Kathleen is an inspiration to me and everyone she meets. Everyone has a story, and I'm hopeful that by sharing stories like hers, we can create a kinder world. For more than 70 years, My Face has been dedicated to changing the faces and transforming the lives of children and adults with facial differences by providing access to holistic comprehensive care, education, resources, and support that pave the way for better outcomes. To learn more, please visit myface.org. If you would like to learn more about the MyFace support groups so that you can connect with others in the craniofacial community, please visit myface.org/online-groups. Be sure to subscribe to My Face, My Story on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube to get notified of our next episode. If you'd like to receive email reminders of new episodes, sign up at myface.org/mystory. That's myface.org/mystory. Thank you for joining us for this episode of My Face, My Story. Remember, it takes courage to share your story, so be brave and speak out.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Paul, the Executive Director of MyFace. MyFace is a nonprofit organization dedicated to changing the faces and transforming the lives of children and adults with facial differences. We do this through various programs and events such as the Transforming Lives educational webinar series, Races for Faces, the Wonder Project, and the groundbreaking My Face, My Story conversational series. You can learn more about all of these on our website at myface.org. If you enjoyed today's program, we hope you'll consider making a donation to help keep programs like this possible, as well as to further the support of the craniofacial community. Thank you.